Some girls come to the door. It was Hope and Tony.
Hope and Tony. She was there for the weekend. And Shanda answered the door. And apparently Steve and Sharon, his wife, were sitting there in the living room. And he heard one of the girls say, "Is Shanda home?" And, of course, Shanda answered the door. So he knew immediately these girls didn't know Shanda. He couldn't hear what was being said altogether, but he heard a little bit. And from what I understand, when she closed the door, he questioned her about it, a little bit angry at her because he didn't feel she was being honest with him.
Well, what we do know is that Melinda had a relationship with another girl, Amanda, and Melinda was very upset that Shanda had had a relationship with her and was out to get Shanda. And so these girls were in cahoots with Melinda. They get her out of the house some way.
Yes. After Steve went to bed, they came back, and Melinda is under a blanket in the back seat. And Shanda left her purse and her coat on the kitchen table. She had no intention of leaving. She was going to the end of the driveway.
Right.
And when she got there, they put her in the car, and Melinda came up from behind and put a knife to her neck.
And threatened her.
Yes.
At that point.
And they took off.
So off they go. These older girls with your 12-year-old daughter.
Yes, and the thing that I have always thought was just unbelievable was that the only person that evening out of the 4 girls that knew Shanda was Melinda Lovelace. The other 3 girls had never met Shanda, had no reason to dislike her. Melinda had told them in the very beginning of the evening that she was going to kill Shanda that night. And they knew that that's what the evening was going to be, and they continued to go with her.
He took her to a place called Witch's Castle.
It's an old house that, I don't know if it burnt down or what, but there's like a stone fireplace that still stands, and it is a little creepy looking, you know, in the middle of the night.
What do you know about what happened when she was there?
They took her there and took off most of her clothes, wanted her, threatened to cut off her hair, told her they were going to throw her in a dungeon that was there or something, where there were bones from dead bodies. I can't even imagine how frightened she was. There's just no way for me to even begin to know. Apparently there were some cars that went by. They said they were afraid somebody would see them, so they decided to leave there.
So they then take her to another location.
They take Shanda to a place called the Burn Pile. It's behind Lori Tackett's house. From what I understand at this point, they take Shanda out of the car, and her hands and her feet are tied. She had had braces put on just several weeks before this. And Melinda gets in front of her, and Shanda's on her knees. And Melinda takes her knee and just crams it up in her face several times. So she's bleeding profusely from the face and the mouth. They stab her in her feet, the bottom of her feet, and in her legs. At one point, Lori and Melinda take a rope, it's on her neck, and each of them pull it until she is no longer conscious. They think she's dead.
What they didn't know was that Shanda was still clinging to life in the trunk of the car. Shanda's night of torture had just begun.
They all then get in the car and they go up to Lori's house, and they go in Lori's room. They're talking, but they think Shanda's dead. And then there's a noise, and the dog begins to bark. And it's Shanda, and she's in the trunk, and she's trying to get out. So Lori says, "I'll take care of this," and she goes out by herself. Lori at one point took a tire iron, and she hit Shanda in the head so that she would not make any more noise. They talk and decide that, you know, they have a real problem here because Shanda's not dead. So they've got to kill her. They've got to do whatever they have to do to make her die. So Hope and Tony say they don't want to go with them. They're tired. They're going to stay and take a nap. And Lori and Melinda leave. Hope and Tony are at the Tackett house for 4 hours with the Tackett's parents and did nothing at all.
Didn't call authorities?
Nope. Tackett's parents came to the door and said, you know, "Where's Lori?" "Well, she's just out riding with Melinda." Didn't do a thing. And there were several chances before this for them to have stopped this, any one of them, and they didn't do it. They're gone for 4 hours. And during this time, Lori wanted to throw her in a creek, and Melinda said no, and they just did all kinds of things to try and kill her. But Shanda would not die. She just would not die. No matter what they did to her, she would not die. And so they go back to the house because it's starting to get light. They tell them, we've got to get rid of her. We've got to do something.
Shanda Scherer was just 12 years old when she was lured from her father's house in the middle of a January night and savagely beaten and tortured by 4 teenage girls. 3 of them had never met Shanda before the night they viciously attacked her. The girls reportedly stabbed her, smashed her in the head with a tire iron, and choked her unconscious. But Shanda wouldn't give up. She was still clinging to life, trapped in the trunk of the car.
Hope says somebody told her that if you want to get rid of a body, you need to burn it. And they, in their immaturity, actually believed if they burned the body and the knife, that it would just totally disintegrate. So they all leave and they go to a gas station. And they get a liter bottle of Pepsi and they fill it up with gasoline. While they're at this gas station, Shanda's in that trunk making so much noise that they have to move the car because they don't want the attendant to hear her back there. Now, she's been tortured for almost 10 hours at this point with a tire iron. She's been stabbed, she's been strangled, she's been beaten, and she's in the trunk. So they leave there with the gas, and they take her to a gravel road, and it's like a big field, an empty field. Very, very close to where they laid her body was very dense forest. Why they laid her right on the side of the road, I have no idea. I think that kind of shows their immaturity as well. But they wrapped her in a blanket of some sort, and they laid her on the side of the road. And Hope Rippey took the gasoline and poured it on her body. And Lori Tackett took a match and knelt down and set her on fire. They all got in the car and they left, and Melinda looked back and said, she's not burning enough. And they went back and they set her on fire a second time. Her cause of death was smoke inhalation because she was alive when they set her on fire.
How do you feel about knowing these were her last hours?
I just don't know that I could describe how I feel about it. I've always prayed that, you know, God took over and kept her safe and didn't let her feel the pain. I feel bad that I couldn't be there and save her and help her. I just can't imagine what she went through.
It sounds like she fought so very hard to live.
She did. She did. She would have lived through everything had it not been for them setting her on fire. I had to know for myself everything that happened, and I had the coroner come to the hospital, and I had him explain the whole exam to me. And she had, in fact, been molested with a blunt instrument, and the only blunt instrument that was in that car that night was the tire iron. And he said that had they not set her on fire, she could have lived. She would have had to have a colostomy. But after a time, that could have been reversed. But after everything they did to her, she still would have lived. So, I mean, there were horrible things that happened to her. I mean, unspeakable things.
So they sodomized her with a tire iron.
They certainly did.
Your baby.
They did.
I'm so sorry. People just can't wrap their head around
I know
that 4 teenage girls could do something so violent, so evil, so terrible to someone they don't even know.
Every one of them had said at one point or another that there got to be a point in the evening where they didn't ask for help because they knew how much trouble they'd be in. So it wasn't about Shanda anymore. It wasn't about how you could save a child's life. It was about how much trouble they were going to be in if they had said stop.
I understand that the testimony was that the last word she was heard to speak was "Mommy."